So I'm just showing you here again my favourite style of sketching, continuous line sketching. This is my little introduction, brief overview of how to get started with your first continuous line urban sketch. This video comes from my most popular class on Skillshare, and because I've just had some exciting things on Skillshare, I won an award which came with a nice prize which let me buy a brand new microphone, which means I'm now refilming all of my Skillshare classes. So this is my refilmed introduction to my most popular Skillshare class. If you want to check that out, or if you want to check out the award-winning class, I've got a link to both of those down below. It gets you a month off a year's membership, or a week to just try, no questions asked. Otherwise, stick with me here, and I always release loads of free content. And the video is just here. And with that, we can, of course, start sketching. So we've got our little reference up here. And what we can see is quite a complicated scene with lots going on. But let's break it down. Let's do this as a first continuous line sketch and see how much we can simplify things. So how are we going to start? Well, the way that I most commonly enjoy starting is to grab a silhouette of the scene. So let's start with that, and let's see how a silhouette and how little information we need to get this whole scene really on the page. Now, if I start off at the right, what we can do is we can go, right, the silhouette is really this gorgeous roof line, isn't it? So if we come across and we just grab these little areas which undulate, they go up and down, we've got a few sort of chimneys. And we're not being clever here, we're not being clever at all, we're just getting the really simple shapes. And we'll talk about shapes, of course, more in the next lesson. But for now, just focus on being simple, not being clever, but just grabbing those most important areas. And it really doesn't matter if you miss something out. It really, really doesn't matter if you miss something out or get something wrong, because we can come back and we can always change things. But what we're trying to do is get that magic feeling, this continuous line feeling, where everything's joined up and just sort of simplified and relaxed. And you can see in very few steps, we can even grab our tree like this, really simple sort of looping feel in very few steps. I would say that already feels like a tall building. And what have we done? Not very much, really, when you think about it. We haven't done very much at all, just a little line with some wobbles. Now, what's the next step? Well, the next step is to get a bit more detail, a bit more feel for that. So what I like to do is work back the other way. And we don't need to get the whole bottom in. We don't have to get every detail in. But what we can do is we can, let's pretend we'd continued this line. So we'd gone across, we ended here. So let's then grab that line, and we can come back. And what I find is strong vertical lines like this, they kind of immediately show you the perspective of what's going on. And as we bring up those vertical lines, these vertical lines are showing us where the different houses, buildings overlap. As we bring them up, we can move off that line and start applying some window shapes. And the windows don't have to be perfect, they don't have to be in the right place. We're trying to get a feel for what's going on, and we're trying to force ourselves to be a little bit uncomfortable and have to really simplify. And we can cross back on ourselves. So let's say we want to put in this sort of railed fence, we can go back and then come over here. So just because you've left this side of the page doesn't mean you have to leave it forever. You can come back. If we come along, we can grab those really key details. So let's have a look at what makes this cafe so interesting. Well, I would argue it's these beautiful sort of frontages here, these lovely, what will be green and beautiful awnings coming down. And we can get the door and make it feel welcoming, and then we can come across and we can grab this other awning. And you notice how, let's say I stopped there, even with this amount of information, Now we know what's going on, don't we? A stacked lot of buildings and then some kind of cafe. The door and these two awnings, they tell you there's a cafe going on. But let's just keep going anyway, because let's explore and experiment with what we are doing. So we can get a little more detail. We can get some of these windows in the neighbouring buildings. We can come back. Like I said, you don't have to stick with your first level of detail. And we can just add stuff in, add details and bits. An important principle in sort of simplifying urban sketching is that you don't have to get every detail. And you don't have to be right. And you don't have to, you know, the thing I like to say is you don't have to count the windows. So you can leave out a window. So let's do that. Let's leave out a window here. And you know what? It's still fine. It still feels to me fine. Even if I do the right number of windows next to it, and I peter off over here with my pen lines and just disappear, and sort of get really loose with the detail. Perhaps do something fun with the foreground, add in that road sign which is just sneaking into the view. Even with the wrong number of windows, with leaving loads out, we know what's going on. And that is what I love about this style of sketching, is that you can be so loose and so abstract, but you still capture it. And that's taken 5 minutes with loads of me wittering on about nonsense, and we've got a beautiful little scene. So let's move on to the next lesson, where we're going to be having a think about shapes and how shapes can make it easier to grab this kind of complicated scene.